I'm going to show you an incredibly simple way of changing your whole perspective of reality. This will revolutionize your understanding of science, and show you, using standard, uncontroversial science, that what science tells you about reality is the wrong way around. As you will discover, this is not a material universe that produces mind. Rather, it is a mental universe that produces matter. However, some of you just aren't going to get it. That's because you are both narrow-minded and closed-minded. You are brainwashed by a paradigm, and you can't escape from it. Nor do you want to. That is your schema for understanding reality, and without it you would be lost. You believe it is better to stick with a bad paradigm than to abandon it and go in search of a better one. That would entail having to leave the herd, which terrifies you. Always stick with the consensus. Always agree with your friends, colleagues and peers. Always accept groupthink. That's your timid, sheep-like rule for living your life. You are not one of the special ones. You are not contra mundum. The establishment relies on people like you to prop it up. You are the last people in the world who would be free thinkers, people receptive to bold new ideas. No, no, no. You will always believe what you are told to believe by the authorities. That's the way you roll. Own it. Zymurgy's first law of evolving system dynamics states, once you open a can of worms, the only way to recan them is to use a larger can. Old worms never die, they just worm their way into larger cans. Most people don't want to open the can. They like things just as they are. They don't want to be challenged by new ideas. They are afraid of them. They see no need for them. Small-minded people can never see far horizons. If they could, they wouldn't be small-minded. Why do people troll ideas they have never encountered before? It's always because of fear. They are scared that their belief system will collapse. That's how fragile it is. It has become obvious that worshippers of scientism are extremely fearful as the followers of mainstream religion. Like them, they lash out against anything that challenges their belief system. They cannot bear paradigm shifts. That's why the great scientist Max Planck said, "A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die, and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it." This, sadly, is the true way in which science operates. Scientists don't listen to facts and arguments. They merely compare any new idea to their paradigm, and if it doesn't fit with their faith in materialism and empiricism, they reject it. You need to wait for these people to die before science can change. They are brakes on all new thinking. Malcolm Forbes said, "Education's purpose is to replace an empty mind with an open one." Religion and science seem determined to replace empty minds with closed minds. Closed-minded people can't wait to express their closed minds. Social media is full of their closed-minded trolling of all new ideas, of anything that might give them a new education. So, you have been taught in science that the first element is hydrogen, with an atomic number of 1. This immediately reflects a materialist way of thinking about reality. In fact, the first element is the photon, with an atomic number of 0. This is not part of the materialist paradigm, and reflects the alternative idealist way of thinking about reality, where mind is the primary reality, and matter is derived from it. Hydrogen atoms are physical atoms. Photons are mental atoms. According to Descartes, all material things are extended, and all mental things are unextended. Photons, as unextended, massless, dimensionless entities that are outside space and time, they reflect infinite length contraction and infinite time dilation, qualify as perfect agents of the Cartesian mind. This concept, by itself, totally changes the whole basis of science. Photons, which stand outside chemistry's periodic table of the elements, become the true basis of all material things. Everything in the physical world is ultimately traceable back to a singularity of countless, indestructible photons enshrining the inescapable law of the conservation of energy. This photonic singularity cannot be explored by science since, being mental, it's beyond the reach of the physical scientific method. The singularity is a purely mathematical world. Photons are mathematical objects, not scientific objects. Science cannot disprove this. It ignores it because such an idea is external to its paradigm. This is how science now functions, by ignoring everything it doesn't like, everything which lies beyond the reach of its method. It might as well be a religious faith. It's not God that is found in the gaps in scientific knowledge, it's mathematics. In fact, mathematics removes any need for science. Such is the hatred of scientists for rationalist mathematics that they refer to this idea, that reality is purely mathematical, as woo-woo. It's irrationalist science that is the real woo-woo. Imagine, for argument's sake, that alongside a world of physical atoms there is a world of non-physical atoms, mind atoms, mathematical atoms. These non-physical atoms aren't anything woo-woo. They are photons. Photons have no mass, do not experience time, have no length, no extension, no dimensions, and always travel at light speed, a speed that no material thing can ever reach. Photons, therefore, have all the characteristics of the building blocks of the eternal soul. What is the eternal soul defined to be? It's massless, immaterial, outside space and time, pure energy, dimensionless, unextended and indestructible. Photons fit the bill exactly. In ancient Greek atomic theory, they would qualify as soul atoms. What could be simpler? Reality comprises the interaction of body atoms, material atoms, and soul atoms, mind atoms. Mind atoms have atomic number 0. Body atoms have an atomic number greater than 0. This would all be obvious to people if the periodic table showed photons as well as material atoms. However, science is driven by the bogus philosophy of materialism and empiricism, and deliberately only shows you what is consistent with its paradigm. It downplays or ignores everything else. It doesn't want you to have your attention drawn to all of the things that demonstrate that its paradigm is false and fallacious. Just like a religion, it immediately shuts down all philosophical criticism, and rubbishes philosophy, because it can't respond to any of its critique. What the whole dualistic Cartesian debate of mind, unextended, versus matter, extended, comes down to is dimensionless atoms, with atomic number 0, versus dimensional atoms, with atomic number greater than 0. That's it. It's real easy stuff. Even scientists could grasp it, if they weren't such closed-minded bigots. To change the entire basis of how science treats reality, you are required to do only one thing. You simply add atoms of atomic number 0 to the periodic table of chemistry. These atoms of atomic number 0 are photons. Why aren't photons in the periodic table? It's because according to materialism, everything stable is made out of the atoms of the periodic table. Yet we know that photons aren't made out of these atoms, so we already know for a fact that materialism is false. When you add photons to the periodic table, you reflect that there are mental structures in the universe made up of dimensionless atoms rather than dimensional atoms. These unobservable mental structures made of photons are none other than our minds, and they exist outside space, time and matter. The mental domain is the world of photons, mental atoms, while the space-time world of matter is the world of the material atoms. What could be simpler? All of the worshippers of the faith of scientism will no doubt start using all sorts of bizarre, irrational arguments to claim that this is wrong. Here's something you should never forget. Science, even though it detests philosophy, is itself a philosophy, namely the philosophy of materialism and empiricism. When you change this philosophy to rationalism and idealism, merely by including photons in the periodic table, you add mind to matter, and the dimensionless to the dimensional. No scientist could ever refute this. Just as religious fanatics quote from the Bible or Quran as if they were stating the truth of reality, so scientists fanatically quote from the Bible of empiricism and materialism, despite this ideology being irrevocably refuted by the existence of photons. Some of them might quote from Daniel Dennett, or Richard Dawkins, or Sam Harris, as if these are prophets from on high. Of course, these people are nothing but the high priests and popes of the religion of scientism. You could no more get an open-minded opinion from them than you could from an evangelical Christian, or an Islamic jihadist. Everything these people say is entirely dictated by the paradigm by which they have been brainwashed. In Schrödinger's Kittens, the renowned science writer John Gribben brilliantly wrote, "The Lorentz transformations tell us that time stands still for an object moving at the speed of light. From the point of view of the photon, of course, it is everything else that is rushing past at the speed of light. And under such extreme conditions, the Lorentz-Fitzgerald contraction reduces the distance between all objects to 0. You can either say that time does not exist for an electromagnetic wave, so that it is everywhere along its path, everywhere in the universe, at once, or you can say that distance does not exist for an electromagnetic wave, or that it touches everything in the universe at once. This is an enormously important idea, which I have never seen given due attention. From the point of view of a photon, it takes no time at all to cross the 150 million kilometer from the Sun to the Earth, or to cross the entire universe, for the simple reason that this space interval does not exist for the photon. Physicists seem to ignore this remarkable state of affairs, because they know that no material object can ever be accelerated to the speed of light, so no human, or mechanical, observer is ever going to experience this strange phenomenon. Perhaps they are simply so stunned by what the equations say that they have not fully thought out the implications. As I hope to persuade you, though, this behavior of space and time from the point of view of photons may help to resolve all the outstanding mysteries of quantum physics. One should go even further than Gribben. All of the secrets of existence are present in the viewpoint possessed by photons rather than the viewpoint possessed by human beings as physical bodies. The viewpoint of the photons, which is that which does not experience time or time, is the exact viewpoint of the mind, the eternal soul. It's the viewpoint that undoes all the weirdness of quantum mechanics. Physicists become confused because they see everything from the wrong perspective, the local perspective of space-time, where nothing can travel faster than light speed, in space-time. Reality understands itself via the non-local perspective of frequency, where everything is instantaneous, because the frequency domain is an immaterial singularity outside space and time. This viewpoint of photons is the viewpoint of rationalism and idealism, whereas the viewpoint of physical atoms, which make bodies, is the viewpoint of empiricism and rationalism. Scientists don't have a clue about true reality because all of their views are locked into the fallacy of physical things. As Gribben points out, scientists devote precisely zero time to considering reality from the viewpoint of photons, mental particles, because this viewpoint is never available to any physical human being. The viewpoint of massless photons, involving maximum length contraction and time dilation, i.e. they are outside space and time, is an impossible viewpoint from the perspective of scientific materialism and empiricism based on sensory experiments taking place in space and time. However, this viewpoint is in no way unavailable. We can all get there by forgetting about our human senses, feelings, experiments, experiences, conjectures, beliefs, interpretations, and by using instead the tools that allow us to transcend our human limitations, namely reason, logic and mathematics. The world of photons is an entirely mathematical viewpoint, the viewpoint of the mind, the soul, of eternity, of the ontological singularity, of what came before the Big Bang. What preceded matter was pure light, light in itself. All matter is derived from light. The state that preceded the Big Bang was a state of pure light, obeying the simplest possible symmetry, the U1 gauge symmetry associated with light, electromagnetism. What could be more obvious than that we start with the simplest possibly symmetry, then break it and create the more complex symmetries associated with space and time? The simplest symmetry is the mind symmetry. All the other symmetries that science describes are matter symmetries, derived from mind via various symmetry breaking operations caused by the wave property of non-orthogonal phase. Scientists are amongst the most closed-minded people on Earth, as their hysterical comments on anything that challenges their religion of scientism invariably prove. They never refute any rational arguments. They simply preach from their Bible of materialism and empiricism, like Christians preaching from the Bible, or Muslims from the Quran. If you're not a Christian, you laugh at the Christian Bible for the scale of its absurdity, and if you're not a materialist, you laugh at the lunacy spouted by irrationalist scientific materialists. Scientists fail to comprehend that unless they can explain reality from the viewpoint of atoms with zero atomic mass, photons, then they will be stuck forever trying to explain reality from only the viewpoint of atoms with atomic numbers greater than zero, material atoms. Why do they believe that this is rational? Why do they imagine they will ever have a complete view of reality when their paradigm is self-evidently incomplete, inconsistent, and predicated on blatantly ignoring the most important viewpoint, namely that of photons? Believers in God could easily claim that God is made of light and that his viewpoint is that of an eternal being outside space and time, exactly the viewpoint excluded from science because it contradicts the sham philosophy of scientific materialism and empiricism. The domain of light is the domain of eternal mathematical minds. By definition, eternal things have no creator. They have always existed, and it's impossible for them not to exist. It is as impossible for God to create immaterial things that exist outside space and time as it is for scientific materialism. When you switch on a light bulb, you are not creating light. You are creating a space-time, material interaction with light, which you then misinterpret because you are seeing reality from the viewpoint of space-time, and not from the viewpoint of the photons, outside space and time. You are prisoners of your own sensory delusions. The domain of light is the domain of dimensionless mathematics. The domain of matter is the domain of dimensional mathematics equals science, based on the dimensions of space and time. What could be more obvious? Sadly, not to dim-witted, atheist scientists who worship their irrational senses and despise reason and logic. The mental domain comprises radio waves, microwaves, infrared waves, visible light, ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma radiation, and other components that haven't even been named, which we shall call ultra-low frequencies at one end of the spectrum, and ultra-high frequencies at the other end of the spectrum. We live in two worlds simultaneously. Our body is in the space-time world of matter, with atoms of atomic number greater than 0, and our mind is the non-space-time world of light, with atoms of atomic number 0 equals photons. There's nothing woo-woo about this. Scientism is the woo-woo. We are simply using well-established facts of science, yet interpreting them without using the bogus paradigm of materialism and empiricism, into which all closed-minded scientists are locked. To use the old cliché, scientists can't think outside the box. The entity that exists outside the space-time box of the physical universe is the singularity of light. This is a mental singularity, which is attached to the physical box, the universe, via Fourier mathematics, which links the frequency domain of mind to the space-time domain of matter. There's nothing difficult about this, yet it completely flummoxes simple-minded scientists because it fatally challenges their faith system, their childish belief in matter. Science has gone as far as it can within its existing framework. Its present paradigm has failed and now a paradigm shift is required. The more that science converges on mathematics, the truer it becomes. The ultimate mathematical domain is the singularity of light, with photons being the real entities that convey real, ontological mathematics. Mathematics is not unreal, abstract and man-made, it is real, concrete, and the fiber and fabric of existence itself. This is a universe of light and of all the relations into which light can enter. Matter is one of light's primary products, and is created via applying complex symmetries to light via the mathematical property of phase. Science doesn't have to do anything strange in order to cure itself. To make progress, it simply has to embrace the mathematical world of photons which exists outside space, time and matter, and is none other than the domain of mind. Only people with autonomous, open minds can understand our message. Scientists, like religious fanatics, have tradition-directed, closed minds. They cannot break out of the scientific tradition of materialism and empiricism by which they have brainwashed. They do not have the intelligence and independence of mind. They are group thinkers and careerists who know it's vital never to stray into heresy, blasphemy, apostasy and unbelief. Autonomous minds don't care what the dinosaurs say. As Max Planck grimly observed, science progresses funeral by funeral. That is, you have to wait for closed-minded scientists to die before you can make progress. They will never change their minds. They are just like Christians and Muslims. Scientists are not susceptible to rational arguments. They are part of a faith system. They won't listen to anything that doubts or challenges their faith in scientism. They will raise every kind of pedantic objection to this video, and totally fail to understand the point. That's what these people do. That's their thing. Scientists reflect Weinberg's corollary: an expert is a person who avoids the small errors while sweeping on to the grand fallacy. These people have ignored the multitude of errors that falsify their theory so that they can proudly stand behind their grand fallacy of materialism and empiricism. Not once do they doubt this paradigm. They are true believers. Just as flat earthers can't move on, scientists are now stuck in their materialist equivalent of flat earth syndrome. They won't accept any evidence that refutes their paradigm, and they seek to always reinterpret evidence in ways that agree with their paradigm. Remember, it was people exactly like today's scientists who once ridiculed the idea that the Earth wasn't at the center of the universe. These people fight progress tooth and claw. These are not the standard bearers of free thinking, new thinking, reason and logic. They are the exact opposite. Scientists are profoundly conservative people obsessed with their non-rational senses, and dismissive of their non-sensory reason. Never forget, only autonomous people can create new thinking. Scientists and religious believers are closed-minded zealots, unable to break out of the systems that have operantly conditioned them and given them a false consciousness. We have demonstrated to all rational people, via science itself, that there is a viewpoint that science knows exists, that of photons, which it then deliberately ignores because that viewpoint necessarily involves abandoning the prevailing scientific paradigm of materialism and empiricism. These crazy, quasi-religious fanatics will never betray their love of nihilistic matter, and hatred of teleological mind. That's just the way it is. You will get worshippers of scientism who will say things like, the photon has no viewpoint. Well, of course it does. Every existent has a viewpoint. What they mean is that the photonic viewpoint does not belong to what currently passes as science, and is not reachable via any physical process in space and time. These people are making the classic error of subjecting photons to a materialist paradigm. The whole point about photons is not that they do not have a viewpoint, but that they do not have a viewpoint that belongs to the scientific paradigm. It is one that cannot be handled by current scientific thinking. Of course, photons have a viewpoint. Only non-existence doesn't have a viewpoint. Anything that exists has its unique perspective, i.e., how the rest of reality looks from its position. The entire trouble with science is that it will not engage with viewpoints outside its paradigm. Rather than admitting that there are valid perspectives outside their paradigm, scientists deny that anything outside their paradigm has any validity. They have zero proof or evidence for this, but they religiously believe it all the same. It's their model that is wrong, not reality. They have got things exactly the wrong way around. The reason why scientists have spectacularly failed to reconcile general relativity and quantum mechanics is that the unification of these two theories demands the viewpoint of photons, which is outside the prevailing scientific paradigm. Scientists have become so stupid that they keep trying to solve the problem from one perspective when in fact two are demanded. Science denies the existence of an eternal photonic singularity of mind. Precisely because of this, it cannot reconcile its two most prized theories because the exact place where they collide head-on is the singularity. Science could be wrapped up in a decade if scientists changed their paradigm to embrace photon-mediated eternal minds. But they won't. These people can't change their minds any more than Christians can. They're fully locked in. Humanity has a host of problems, but perhaps the biggest of all is that most people, once they have become strongly committed to a particular belief system, find it impossible to break free of their beliefs. They look at the world according to their belief goggles, and interpret everything according to these beliefs. They can't comprehend reality without their goggles. They troll anyone who dares to challenge their faith. They won't listen to rational arguments. They don't care. Our message is purely for people with open minds, people who can think for themselves, autonomous people who don't follow the herd. The more logical and rational you are, the less you will sign up to belief systems that are patently false. Science is now patently false. The biggest effort in scientific history has gone into creating a final theory of quantum gravity, but it has achieved nothing. That's because the paradigm is false. Science, rather than change its paradigm, keeps trying to do the impossible. It is now such a faith system that it could go on forever in this way, like Christians waiting for the second coming. In the year 1 million, will Christians still be waiting for their Christ to come back to them? And will scientists still be trying to solve quantum gravity within their failed paradigm? Don't bet against it. It's time to move on and up. It's time to see the light. It's time for humanity to become enlightened and realize that light is the origin of everything. And light is nothing other than pure, eternal, wave mathematics. Just do the math.